The morning sun filtered softly through Helen's kitchen window, casting golden streaks across the checkered tablecloth. At 76, she had grown fond of her quiet rituals, watering the plants, humming old jazz tunes, and preparing her breakfast with care. Today's plate looked like something out of a wellness magazine. Juicy slices of ripe mango, a small bowl of golden raisins, a chilled glass of fresh orange juice. Beside them, her daily blood pressure pill waited patiently, neatly tucked next to a floral napkin. Nature's candy? She smiled to herself, taking a sip of juice. For as long as she could remember, Helen had believed in the healing power of fruit. After all, weren't fruits supposed to be the most wholesome, life-giving foods on Earth? She had read the articles, heard the doctors praise fiber and vitamins, remembered her mother's advice, when in doubt, have some fruit. But what Helen didn't know, what no one had ever told her, was that not all fruits remain harmless as we age. Some, when consumed in the wrong way or at the wrong time, can quietly disrupt everything: your blood sugar, your digestion, even the effectiveness of your medication. That morning, Helen didn't notice anything wrong right away. But by midday, her hands trembled slightly as she folded laundry. Her heartbeat felt a little too fast. There was a tightness behind her eyes she couldn't quite explain. By evening, a dull ache settled in her stomach, and she pushed away her dinner. Was it fatigue, the weather, a sign of aging? She didn't know. But the symptoms kept coming, day after day in quiet waves. Brain fog, uneven energy, digestive discomfort. It wasn't until a routine checkup weeks later that the pieces began to come together. "It's your diet," her doctor said gently, flipping through her chart. "Too much sugar, too much acid, and grapefruit juice?" He paused. Helen blinked. "Every morning? With my pill?" What followed was a conversation that changed her relationship with food forever. This is not a story about fear. It's about knowledge, about learning how even the most innocent choices can have surprising consequences. And most of all, it's about discovering that growing older doesn't mean losing control, it means gaining wisdom. Because when it comes to your health, it's not just about what you eat. It's about what you understand. Chapter 1, The Sugary Temptation. Helen had always believed that fruit was her friend. Sweet, colorful, and filled with vitamins, how could it ever be anything but good? For most of her life, she enjoyed a slice of mango after dinner, a handful of raisins in her oatmeal, or a piece of jackfruit on warm afternoons. Sometimes, on special occasions, she even treated herself to durian, the pungent tropical fruit that reminded her of her travels through Southeast Asia. At 76, fruit was her comfort and her ritual. But lately, something had started to shift. She found herself waking up tired, even after 8 hours of sleep. Her hands felt weak when she held a mug of tea, and walking up the stairs left her breathless in a way that didn't feel normal. Some days, she experienced strange bursts of energy, followed by a crash that sent her to the couch. She brushed it off at first. Maybe it's just age, she said to herself, but deep down, she knew something was off. One Thursday morning, after another wave of fatigue, Helen visited her neighbor and longtime friend Frank. He was 74, always cheerful and proud of managing his health through walking and a clean diet. As they sipped tea on his porch, Helen sighed. "I don't know what's happening to me, Frank. I eat well, I walk, but I just feel off." Frank nodded slowly. "I used to feel that way too. Then my doctor checked my blood sugar." Helen blinked. "But I don't eat sweets." He chuckled. "Neither did I. But I was eating fruit like candy. Mangoes, raisins, jackfruit, all the sugary stuff. It spiked my blood sugar without me even knowing." Helen looked down, thinking about her breakfast that morning. 2 ripe mango slices, some raisins, and toast. It had felt healthy, clean even. Frank continued, "The thing is, our bodies change after 70. The same fruit that helped us before can hurt us now, especially the sugary ones. And dried fruit? That's just sugar in disguise." That night, Helen couldn't sleep. She got up, opened her pantry, and read the labels for the first time. Her raisins had 26 grams of sugar in a small serving. The dried jackfruit? Even more. And mango, her beloved mango, had nearly as much sugar as a chocolate bar. She sat in silence, stunned. The next morning, she called her doctor and booked a visit. After a quick blood test, the results were clear. Her glucose was too high. Her doctor gently explained, "Helen, your diet is full of natural sugar, but sugar all the same. Your pancreas can't keep up the way it used to. That's why you feel drained. It's time to adjust." Over the next few weeks, Helen began to change. She swapped raisins for blueberries. She let go of the jackfruit and learned to love apples with almond butter. She ate smaller portions of mango only on weekends and said goodbye to durian. At least for now. It wasn't easy. These weren't just foods, they were memories. But as her energy returned, her clarity sharpened, and the dizzy spells faded, Helen felt something deeper: strength. She had taken control. And as she walked through the market passing trays of golden mangoes, she smiled, not in longing, but in peace. Sometimes, the sweetest things are the ones we must let go of. Not out of fear, but out of love for the life still ahead. Chapter 2. The Acid Trap. Helen loved the brightness of citrus. There was something cheerful, almost childlike, about peeling a ripe orange and letting the juice run over her fingers. Lemon water in the morning made her feel clean, fresh, awake. Grapefruit, pink and tangy, was her breakfast companion for over 20 years. And in the summertime, few things felt more refreshing than a bowl of cold pineapple chunks. After all, she had read that citrus fruits were filled with vitamin C, good for the skin, and boosted immunity. They helped with digestion, but lately her digestion seemed anything but helped. It started with a strange burning at night. Helen would wake up around 2 a.m. feeling pressure in her chest. At first she thought it was anxiety or maybe her heart, but her doctor checked and assured her it wasn't cardiac. "Could be reflux," he said, scribbling something in his notes. "Reflux?" she asked. "But I don't eat anything heavy at night." He tilted his head. "Do you eat anything acidic?" Helen thought back. Her evening snack had been simple: a bowl of fresh pineapple and 2 slices of grapefruit. She blinked. "Yes, fruit." He nodded. "Citrus is healthy but acidic, and your stomach, especially at your age, may not tolerate it like it used to. As we get older, the lining of the stomach gets more sensitive. Acid becomes an enemy in disguise." The explanation made sense, but it still caught her by surprise. She'd spent years trusting citrus. It had always made her feel clean and energized. But now, it left her with heartburn, bloating, and a throat that felt raw the next morning. Determined to understand more, Helen sat down that evening with a notebook and began tracking what she ate and how she felt afterward. Orange juice in the morning, slight nausea. Grapefruit with lunch, pressure in her chest by evening. Lemon water before bed, acid rising in her throat by midnight. It wasn't always immediate. Sometimes the discomfort built slowly, like a whisper that turned into a shout. And worst of all, the symptoms made her restless, tired during the day, irritable, foggy. That Sunday at church, she sat beside her friend Linda, a soft-spoken widow in her early 70s. Linda noticed her discomfort and asked gently if she was all right. "I think citrus is hurting me," Helen confessed. "Can you believe that?" Linda gave a knowing smile. "I can. It happened to me too. I used to start every morning with orange juice. Then came the ulcers." Helen leaned in. "Ulcers?" Linda nodded. "They said it was the acid. The juice stripped my stomach lining. I thought I was doing something healthy, but it turned into something painful." That conversation stayed with Helen. It was a reminder that she wasn't alone, and that even good intentions like choosing fruit needed wisdom to guide them. Over the next week, Helen made some changes. She swapped orange juice for warm water with cucumber and mint. Instead of pineapple at night, she tried slices of baked apple. She still enjoyed the occasional citrus, just not on an empty stomach. And never before bed. The difference was dramatic. She started sleeping through the night. The pressure in her chest faded. Her energy returned in the mornings, and she no longer felt bloated after meals. At her next doctor's appointment, her digestion was the first thing she brought up. "I feel like myself again," she told him, "and all I did was ease up on citrus." He smiled. "Your body is always talking to you. I'm glad you listened." Helen walked home that day under a sky full of soft clouds, thinking about how much she'd had to unlearn. Fruit wasn't bad, but for people like her who'd crossed into their 70s, it wasn't about good or bad anymore. It was about timing. It was about balance. It was about listening. At the market later that week, she watched a young woman buy 3 bags of oranges and a jug of fresh grapefruit juice. Helen almost said something, but then she smiled to herself. That woman would learn in her own time, just as she had. The body may age, but wisdom grows. And sometimes that wisdom is as simple as knowing which fruit belongs on your plate and which belongs in your past. Chapter 3. Dehydrated, Danger. There was something comforting about dried fruit. To Helen, it was the perfect little snack. Convenient, tidy, no need to peel or wash. She kept small containers of raisins and prunes in her pantry, often tossing a handful into her purse for long walks or afternoon errands. They were her guilt-free treats, far better than cookies or candy, or so she believed. She remembered her mother used to give her dried apricots as a child during wintertime. Good for the stomach, she used to say. Helen held on to that thought for decades. But lately, the comfort was turning into confusion. It began with her digestion. Despite eating what she believed was a clean, fiber-filled diet, Helen had become uncomfortably bloated after meals. Her stomach felt full for hours, and sometimes her bowels slowed down to a crawl. She drank plenty of water and stayed active, yet something was off. She never suspected the dried fruit. Until one afternoon, her friend Martha came to visit. Martha, 78, had always been meticulous about food. She arrived holding a paper bag and sat at Helen's kitchen table with a sigh. "I had a strange episode last week," Martha said. "Almost fainted at the garden center." "What happened?" Helen asked, concerned. "I'd skipped lunch, ate a bunch of dried apricots in the car instead. Thought it tied me over." Martha paused, her voice quiet. 10 minutes later, I was dizzy, shaky, completely out of it. Helen listened intently. "My doctor said my blood sugar spiked and dropped fast," Martha continued. "Those dried fruits, they hit harder than I thought, and with no fiber left to slow it down, well, it messed me up." Helen stared down at the little bowl of raisins sitting on the counter. She had eaten some just an hour earlier. That night, Helen began reading. She learned that drying fruit removes water but concentrates sugar and calories. One small serving of dried fruit could contain as much or more sugar than a slice of cake, and without water content or enough fiber, it digested rapidly, creating sudden sugar spikes. Even worse, she read about additives like sulfur dioxide used in preserving dried fruit, which could irritate the lungs or digestive tract, especially in older adults. It was like pulling back a curtain she hadn't known was there. The next morning, she went for her usual walk but skipped the raisin snack. Instead, she packed some pear slices in a little cooler bag. No sugar rush, no bloating, and best of all, no crash. That small change was enough to convince her. She slowly began replacing her dried fruit with fresh alternatives. Apple slices instead of prunes, grapes instead of raisins, and soft steamed pears instead of apricots. The difference in how she felt was subtle but real. No more long naps after lunch. No more unexplained gas or bloating. No more sugar crashes that left her foggy and frustrated. At her next senior center meeting, Helen brought a tray of fresh-cut fruit instead of her usual trail mix. As her friends sampled it, she explained her new discovery. "I just never realized how concentrated dried fruit is," she told them. "It's not bad, but it's not as innocent as it looks." One friend, Jean, admitted she often snacked on dried figs to avoid sweets. Another said she bought boxes of dried cranberries thinking they were healthy. Helen gently shared what she had learned, not to scare them, but to give them the choice she never had. Sometimes health isn't about giving up things we love, but understanding them better. Helen still kept a small jar of prunes in the pantry for those rare days when she needed a little help moving things along. But it no longer sat center stage. Freshness had found its way back into her kitchen and, in a way, back into her life. Dried fruit may be sweet, but nothing beats the feeling of waking up light, clear, and truly well. Chapter 4. The Can of Memories. It had been 3 years since Thomas passed. Helen still kept some of his favorite things around: the navy sweater he always wore on chilly evenings, his fishing hat, and the small, worn-out cookbook he scribbled in during their first years of marriage. But there was one item that always made her pause: a can of peaches in light syrup, tucked away on the top shelf of her pantry. Thomas had loved canned peaches. Every Friday they'd share a bowl of them over vanilla ice cream while watching an old movie. It was never about the taste, it was the ritual, the comfort of consistency, the sweetness of togetherness. One afternoon, on a particularly quiet day, Helen pulled down the can. The kitchen was silent. The light syrup sloshed inside as she turned it in her hands. The expiration date was still good. She hesitated, then smiled. "Why not?" she whispered. She opened the can, drained the syrup, and arranged the soft yellow slices into a small white bowl. They shimmered slightly, still glistening with sugar. She took a bite. It tasted like memory. But 20 minutes later, her stomach began to churn. By dinner, Helen felt bloated, uncomfortable, and strangely sluggish. She couldn't concentrate on her crossword. Her face felt flushed, and her hands were slightly shaky. She hadn't felt like this in weeks, not since she'd cleaned up her eating. And then it hit her. The peaches. The next day, she looked closer at the can's label. 18 grams of sugar per serving, with only vague mentions of preservatives and additives she couldn't pronounce. Even though she had drained the syrup, the fruit itself had soaked in it for months, maybe years. She had always believed canned fruit was a decent backup, safe, convenient, and sweet. But in that moment, she saw it for what it truly was: a processed product, not a fresh companion. The texture, once familiar, now felt artificial. The aftertaste lingered longer than it should have. More than that, it made her realize something painful and true. She wasn't just holding on to peaches, she was holding on to Thomas. Later that week, she brought it up in conversation with her nutritionist during a routine check-in. "I had some canned peaches, just once. It reminded me of my husband, but I felt awful after." Her nutritionist smiled kindly. "Canned fruit is tricky. It's marketed as healthy, but most of it is soaked in syrup. Even light syrup has more sugar than people realize. Plus, preservatives can mess with your digestion, especially as we age." Helen nodded, quietly absorbing the truth. "You're not doing anything wrong by remembering," the nutritionist added, "but maybe there's a way to honor the memory without the discomfort." That evening, Helen tried something new. She sliced a fresh peach, soft and ripe, and topped it with a small spoonful of plain Greek yogurt. She added a sprinkle of cinnamon, the way Thomas used to with his oatmeal. It wasn't the same, but it was lighter, brighter, and most importantly, it didn't leave her bloated, dizzy, or drained. It left her okay. A few days later, she went through her pantry and gently removed the remaining cans of fruit. Not in sadness, but with love. She donated them to a food drive, hoping they'd serve someone else in a better way. She kept the little white bowl, though, the one she used to serve the peaches in. Not because of the fruit, but because of the moments it held. And because grief, she realized, doesn't mean you stop remembering. It just means you start choosing what you carry forward. At her book club, Helen shared her story. Several of the women nodded in agreement. "I used to live on canned fruit," one woman said. "It was easy, but I never felt great after." "Me too," said another. "I thought I was saving time, but I was adding sugar I didn't need." Helen smiled, feeling less alone. Canned fruit had once been comfort. But real comfort, she learned, was found not in the sweetness of syrup, but in the strength to choose better for your body, for your future. And sometimes, even for your heart. Chapter 5, The Grapefruit Warning. Helen loved starting her mornings with a glass of grapefruit juice. It was crisp, slightly bitter, and made her feel awake, refreshed. She'd been drinking it for decades. It paired perfectly with her multivitamins and blood pressure medication, or so she thought. But something strange had been happening. Even with regular medication, her blood pressure readings had started fluctuating. She felt lightheaded more often. Occasionally, her heart would race for no reason at all. Once, she had nearly fainted while folding laundry. Her doctor, Dr. Ellis, had been reviewing her test results and dosage when he suddenly asked, "Helen, are you drinking grapefruit juice?" She nodded. "Every morning, with my pill. I always have." He gently set down her chart and looked her in the eyes. "Helen, you need to stop." Grapefruit, he explained, was unlike other fruits. It contained compounds that interfered with enzymes in the liver, specifically the ones that broke down many prescription medications. For someone on blood pressure or cholesterol meds like Helen, grapefruit could either intensify the drug's effect or block it entirely. Both outcomes were dangerous. Even half a grapefruit, Dr. Ellis warned, can cause issues. And the effects don't go away quickly. They can last for over 24 hours. It builds up silently. Helen sat quietly, the realization sinking in. What she thought was a healthy habit had been quietly working against her. She recalled the dizziness, the odd heart rhythms, the tiredness. She had blamed age, stress, and even the weather. Not once had she thought of the grapefruit in her fridge. "I had no idea," she whispered. "Most people don't," he said kindly. "But now you do, and will adjust." Back home, Helen opened the fridge and stared at the bottle of juice. It was nearly full. The pink label claimed 100% natural, no added sugar, heart healthy. But not for her heart. She poured it out. And for the first time in weeks, she felt strong, not because of what she drank, but because of what she chose to let go. In the following days, Helen began reading labels more carefully. She looked up each fruit, each additive, and how it might interact with her medications. She learned to ask her pharmacist questions she never thought to ask before. Most importantly, she felt informed. She wasn't scared, she was empowered. At her next neighborhood luncheon, she shared her experience. "You all know I loved grapefruit," she said with a smile, "but it didn't love me back." The room laughed. Then they listened. One woman said her husband had been feeling dizzy too, and he drank grapefruit juice daily with his cholesterol pills. Another realized she was doing the same. The conversation turned into a moment of shared discovery. Helen was proud, not just of what she had learned, but of what she had helped others realize. Conclusion: the fruit of wisdom. Till day 200 words. Helen's journey began with good intentions. She believed in the power of fruit, the sweetness of nature, the comfort of tradition. But through trial, listening and learning, she discovered a deeper truth. Not all fruits are harmless. Not all habits stay helpful. From sugary temptations to acidic missteps, from dried convenience to canned memories, and finally to the hidden dangers of medication interaction, Helen's story was not about fear, but about awareness. She still enjoyed fruit. But now, she chose wisely. She listened to her body, asked better questions, and trusted that wisdom, like health, grows with time. Thank you so much for being here and joining us on this heartfelt journey. If this story touched you, made you think, or reminded you of someone you love, please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Your voice matters, and your story might help someone else. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next video filled with more life lessons, warmth, and wisdom for the golden years. We'll see you again soon. Take care, stay well, and keep choosing wisely.